why. We have former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani with us now. Mayor Giuliani, you're here?
I'm right here. I'm watching it. I'm watching what's happening in my city with a tremendous amount of sorrow and broken heart.
Yeah.
I just never. I was mayor 8 years, and Bernie Carup is one of my 3 police commissioners. Howard Safer, Bill Bratton. I would tell you, we took over a city that had had 2 riots in 3 years. This kind of thing. I never had this happen in 8 years ever. This is. But I have to tell you one thing you probably don't know. You see those police officers in white shirts? Those are not police officers. Those are higher-ranking officers. Those are lieutenants, captains, and above. Now, that's the difference between what happened in Minneapolis the other night to Mr. Floyd and what happens in my city. Superior officers should have been on the scene of when Mr. Floyd was killed. It probably wouldn't have happened. They would have stopped the officer who was out of control. That's why the officers, when you see an officer in white, that is not a police officer. That's not even a sergeant. That's a lieutenant or a captain and possibly even an inspector. Those are very high-ranking officers, very equivalent to a captain in the Army or a colonel in the Army, like the one there in a mask. He's there to watch the other police officers. He's there to make sure that they don't use any force except the force that's necessary to restrain the substantial violence against them in their city. And I think that's one of the things that other police departments could learn. When that situation happened with Mr. Floyd, and I have to tell you, the shame of this is nobody disagrees. Nobody, white, black, or in between, disagrees that what happened to Mr. Floyd is an outrage. I am about as pro-police as you can get. I grew up in a family of 5 police officers. I worked with the police for 30 years of my life as a prosecutor, a high-ranking Justice Department official. I've defended them in very difficult situations. I also have prosecuted and put in jail 70 police officers. So I know the difference. And I don't prejudge cases, but I can't possibly not react to what that officer did. It was almost indescribable. He was warned numerous times that he might be killing the man. It just shocked me to see that the other 3 police officers didn't stop it. But I noticed there wasn't a superior officer there. That went on for 20 minutes.
That's interesting.
In New York City, a lieutenant or a captain would have shown up. And he'd been pulled off that man in a second. And if I were there, I would have pulled him off. I'd have pulled him off and maybe he would have shot me. But I don't know why no one pushed that man off the man he was killing.
It's such a great question.
The shame of it, Harris, is this is something that could have united us. We very often do have disputes over police brutality. There are times in which we've had phony and completely exaggerated claims of police brutality by racial incendiaries and racial thugs and criminals who live off these to make money. This is a legitimate, bad situation that has to be remedied. And it's the fault of the police that this happened. And it's not just the one officer. That's a poorly trained police department. That's a poorly managed police department. That man was never trained. The other man, Tao, standing there, obviously never had any training. The other 2 never had any training. And the police department is not well organized since there was no superior officer there. If you look at that picture right now, there may be more superior officers than police officers. Take a look at that, Minnesota. You got to do that. Cities run, and I'm sorry to get political, cities run by progressives don't know how to police. I'm sorry. 30 cities went up last night. I went and looked at every one of them. Every one of them has a progressive Democratic mayor. This would not have happened when I was mayor of New York City. I think you can ask anybody. It should not happen because this is not a protest for Mr. Floyd. This is a desecration of Mr. Floyd's memory. People don't steal liquor. They don't break open liquor stores and walk out with pot. I watched that last night in Minnesota. You are demonstrating for Mr. Floyd, and you're getting liquor to get yourself drunk or to sell it. You don't steal bicycles. You don't steal televisions. These people are doing so much damage to us. It's really, really horrifying, and we've got to reject this.
I want to ask
everybody
you
has to reject
just in terms of what you were telling us about should have happened in Minnesota with superior officers in those white shirts. With Eric Gardner in your city years ago, was that another situation? Was that a teaching moment?
I was not the mayor. I was not the mayor when Eric Gardner took place. I don't remember, frankly, if it was Mayor Bloomberg or Mayor de Blasio. And I don't remember if there were superior officers on the scene. I tend to think there were. So I mean,
it doesn't. Looking for that.
That doesn't mean. Harris, it doesn't mean just because there's a superior officer there, he's going to absolutely make the right decision. But it gives you a much better opportunity. And the Garner case was closer than this. I'm not justifying it or not. I'm just telling you, as a lawyer, if I were going to, or as a prosecutor, would have had a harder time prosecuting the Eric Garner case than prosecuting this case. I don't think that murder 3 is the right charge either. I think it clearly is at least murder in the second degree. I had a long conversation. I had a long text with Judge Napolitano the other day, and we went over intent together. And unless it turns out that asphyxiation is not the cause of death, if it isn't the cause of death, then you have a problem with a murder charge. It would have to be attempted murder. But if asphyxiation is the cause of death, they're going to do a second
autopsy.
Well, then it should be. Let's assume that was the cause of death, asphyxiation. If that was, then murder 2 at least, I would have charged murder 1 in case he wants to plead and plead him down to murder 2. You charge murder 3, this guy could get off with manslaughter. And then we're going to have another legitimate outrage, but hopefully not this. You are absolutely correct to be outraged about what happened to Mr. Mr. Floyd.
Well, and
George Floyd.
And you know what I wrote down in my notes from what you were...
You could be outraged over Mr. Garner, too. I'm just trying to say, and I'm not trying to minimize Garner. I'm just trying to say...
No, and...
This one is so clear. We don't have to talk about another case.
Yeah.
I mean,
I want to point to this because I wrote down in my notes what you said. This could have been a point of unifying us all. It's a missed opportunity.
It was I called 20 police friends of mine. Generally, they're the people who call me and say they're being unfair to the police, they're exaggerating it. They call me and they said, we're disgusted, we're outraged, we're shocked. You think of your commentators on Fox, who generally are Dan Bongino, Bernie Kerik. I mean, these guys they were cops. They actually work for me. They were cops.
Wow.
Every single one of them immediately. Geraldo Rivera, immediately. There's no disagreement here between you and CNN about what happened. So why are we having this? This man is going to be brought to justice. The president brought the FBI in 3 hours.
One thing that you and I have not talked about, and we're going to scoop pretty quickly because the governor of the state of Minnesota is going to be giving a news conference just momentarily. And I'm speaking now with the former mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani, a man who wanted to be in the White House. He's run for president of this great nation. You've held so many different roles. And to get your perspective tonight on the leadership that we saw on the ground, something that's teaching us all, maybe some of our viewers would have known what those crisp white shirts were, and that they were leadership in the NYPD and not just lower rank and file officers who were doing a job of restraint and a monster job with a huge population of people spilling out in the streets of New York. But I just want to get your last thought. I want to get your last quick thought on, how we move on from this. One thing that you would like to see happen. How do we bring this to an end? You had 2 riots
I think maybe,
right when you took over, right before you took over.
Let's simplify it a little. let's remind the pro-police people, of which there are many, and there should be, that these protesters who are becoming rioters, they're the minority. Most of the people who are outraged about what happened are at home. They're not doing this. This is a small minority. And by the same token, Officer Chauvin is the minority. The majority are those police officers who you were praising for restraint. I mean, would you like to do that job? Would you like to have that helmet on and have a Molotov cocktail thrown at you, not knowing if you're going to come home to your children? And they do it to protect everybody, including minorities. And they're mostly really good people, police. And so are mostly the members of the community. And it's all being ruined by a bunch of criminals. That's who they are. They're criminals. They wanted an excuse to loot a liquor store.
All right.
And I'd love to hear the governor's explanation.
Mayor, but they are moving in at Union Square, and you can hear them.
Well, they have to. They can't. You can't allow your city to be burned. You only allow so much, and then you got to stop it. I believe in arresting the first person, and then the second, and the third, and this doesn't happen. That's why I never had this happen.
Yeah, I got you.
And that's why I find the leadership in Minnesota.
Well, they are doing it tonight. They are doing it tonight. We have seen it play out on the screen.
I think this is caused by that weak mayor, who should never have been a mayor, allowing them to take a police precinct.